This BBC podcast is supported by ads outside the UK.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
You're about to listen to a brand new episode of Curious Cases. Shows are going to be released weekly, wherever you get your podcasts. But if you're in the UK, you can listen to the latest episodes first on BBC Sounds. I'm Hannah Fry.
And I'm Dara O'Brien.
And this is Curious Cases.
The show where we take your quirkiest questions,
your crunchiest conundrums,
and then we solve them.
With the power of science.
I mean, do we always solve them?
I mean, the hit rate's pretty low.
But it is with science.
It is with science.
Look, I have a problem.
Tell me.
You know, I think, and I've been very quiet about this for the last 2 years we've been doing this show.
Good of you.
That when the approach is made for me to come in here, the title sort of promised something.
Curious Cases?
Yeah, I mean...
What were you expecting?
Well, I was expecting more like... What mysterious secrets does the universe... Like in a Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World... 1970s, here's some grainy footage of a Yeti. I thought that we'd be out looking for alien life and stuff.
Yeah.
We're like curious, weird things.
Crop circles, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I've been very good at me sitting here talking to all these esteemed scientists and it's been really interesting.
But you wanted supernatural.
I kind of wanted an inexplicable thing. I kind of wanted like, why did the plates fly across the room? You know, that's what I thought this was going to be.
Right, I haven't seen the Arthur C. Clarke programme that you're
It's amazing. It was a time of mysteries, the 70s. We had no answers to anything. But we had a lot of questions. We had a lot of footage of stuff. Footage that has mysteriously dried up since we gave everyone in the world a camera. And now we no longer have any photographs.
Which is weird, isn't it?
It is strange.
That is weird.
Yeah.
I think that does mean that there was a time limit on shows like that. I'll be honest with you. I think the kind of cases that we're investigating are more for now. Look, people can send in their supernatural questions if they like to curiouscases@bbc.co.uk. But the premise of this show is that we answer listener questions. And so I can only deal with what I'm given, Dara. All right?
I'm already writing a poltergeist letter.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Darren O'Byrne. Why poltergeists? Okay.
Do you really want something that's a bit...
I just feel that some of those questions still linger in my head. But this week, I think we genuinely have a thing.
we can turn it into that if you want.
Oh, I totally want to turn it into that. I know when we start, we're going to start as if a science question. We're going to get to the...
We're going to get to the weird.
We're going to get to the mythic weird thing.
Should we tell them what it's about?
Yeah, do.
Okay, all right. We're going to do spontaneous combustion.
Oh, look at it. It's a phenomenal thing. And of course, at some point, we're going to do spontaneous human combustion.
We're going to do spontaneous human combustion, which is the idea that in the 1970s and 80s, I think particularly, there were endless stories of mostly women, I think, having just poof, burst into flames.
Burst into flames. But it was such an evocative image. There'd be a photograph, there'd be post-mortem photographs of a chair, and there'd be scorch marks all around the shape of a body, and then there'd be 2 feet left. And be like, what happened? It must have happened instantly.
Just like that.
Gone.
Okay.
Absolutely.
It's a little treat for you. If you get all the way through it, Dara, and you behave very well, I'll let you do spontaneous human combustion.
Oh, wow.
So here is the question that we got sent in by listener Nicole, who lives in France.
Bonjour, Hannah and Dara. I'm Nicola and I live in Saint-Mathieu, France. I'm renovating a farmhouse and want to nourish my aged wooden floors. One choice is to use linseed oil that should be rubbed in with a rag. The directions on the tin say that all rags must be washed or submerged in water after, as they may spontaneously combust. That got me thinking, how does this happen and what other materials can spontaneously combust? A bientôt!
Okay, it's less supernatural than you might like, but it's still interesting.
Yeah, it turned into a property show for a second there.
Well, you know, nothing says beautiful, idyllic French countryside like an impending threat of a fireball.
Yeah.
You know? Luckily, today, in the studio, we have got some people to help answer these questions, including human combustion later. We've got Andrew Seller, who is a professor of inorganic chemistry at University College London, and science teacher turned content creator, Emmanuel Wallace, better known to his millions of social media followers as Big Manny. All right, Andrew, let's start with the most obvious question we've got here. What is spontaneous combustion?
So I think before we get to the spontaneous bit, we should just look at combustion. And combustion is the idea that something would be consumed by fire, effectively. It's a chemical reaction. The technical term would be exothermic. In other words, the temperature rises. And secondly, it produces light, so generally a flame.
This spontaneous part, though, tell me about that.
So the spontaneous part is kind of interesting. And I first came across it as a child. So I grew up in New York City until I was about 12. And my parents would rent for a week a house somewhere. And we were on a place called Fire Island, which looks out over the Atlantic. It was one of these classic wooden houses,
Sorry, it was called Fire Island?
Funnily enough, that's the name of the place. Classic house which had those steps, those wooden steps up the front. And one afternoon, I could smell smoke. And I saw some wisps coming up from the steps. And what turned out was that they had a storeroom under the stairs. And there were the classic things, tins of paint, rags. And over time, things had gotten to the point where they were smoldering.
Well, look, I'm now thinking of rags and tins of paint in my own house. This is not reassuring. So what's going on right now in people's rags?
So rags are, first of all, they are flammable, right? You can burn a rag if you heat it up enough. On its own, it's not going to heat itself up. But the interesting thing is that if you soak it in something like linseed oil is kind of a classic.
Which is what Nicola was talking about with her French house.
Exactly. I mean, if you use something like linseed oil, then linseed oil reacts with air very, very gently. It reacts with air gently. It reacts with the oxygen because the oil itself, it's actually one of those polyunsaturates. And those are subject to react with oxygen. And when they react with oxygen, guess what? They warm up a little bit. And the thing about the rag is that it will have the linseed oil very thinly spread, so you've got quite a big surface area. And it may very gently pick up oxygen, warm up, and under the right conditions, it can get to the point where it's hot enough to become self-sustaining, right, that it takes off. And so that would be the spontaneous bit, is that there's been no intervention. When you think about fires, in school we learn about the fire triangle, right? There's the fuel, there's the oxidizer, and then typically you need some source of ignition. You need a spark or a match or something. But in this case, that ignition comes from the fact that the fuel and oxidizer are reacting together, and it just gets warm enough to go over a threshold. And then it takes off. And that's what must have happened under those steps.
Yeah, because when I was a kid and I'm seeing the fire triangle the first time, it was just heat. And I thought, that's not enough. Surely I need a spark or I need something explosive, like a match going off or something. But it can just be a case of it just slowly warming to a point where...
That's right. Where suddenly it really takes off. And then a flame bursts out and now your house burns down.
OK, but all of a sudden, I'm worried about sort of everyday things. Manny, is this, apart from avoiding living in places that are actually called Fire Island, what kind of other things should I be worried about in everyday life? Is there anything else that can spontaneously combust?
One of the things that can combust is grass. As Andrea was saying, we need 3 main ingredients to start a fire. We need a fuel, we need oxygen, and we also need heat. Now, during summer, when the sun is extremely hot, we have that heat. So that's already one part of the triangle. We have the dry grass, which is the fuel. And then obviously we have the oxygen as well, which is just around in the atmosphere.
Hang on, though. So this is like, I have heard of stories of like giant hay bales just bursting into flames. Is that what's happening there?
Yeah, because it's literally like the perfect conditions.
The additional factor which comes into play is also fermentation, is that often sort of in the middle, everything is quite compressed and you've got bacteria which are going to be chewing away. They will help to warm things up. And so, essentially it's this question of getting up to that threshold temperature at which suddenly things take off and become kind of irreversible, uncontrollable or whatever.
Yeah, because it's literally like large amounts of energy is released. So that's the exothermic part of the reaction. So that's how we get the heat.
Right, so we're avoiding grass and hay bales. And all of a sudden, I'm worried about all of the rags and tins of paint in Dara's house.
So I think there's an interesting question here going back to Nicola and whether Nicola should be terribly worried about her floorboards. The process which actually leads to the spontaneous combustion is this oxidation, this autoxidation which happens. And when she applies it on the surface of the wood as a kind of thin layer, the autoxidation leads to curing. Now, the surface area is actually really quite limited. Once it's cured, it's locked down. You're not going to have your floorboards catching fire. And that's one of the reasons why we don't have to worry if we're using tung oil or whatever it is to make our kitchen worktops look prettier.
So should she, or should we, or any of us, lay them flat, hang them out, whatever, what's the best?
I mean, I think just not keeping large numbers of rags together and certainly storing them in a way that there isn't other fuel available.
Talking about hay setting on fire, right? One of my favourite news stories of recent years was there was a pig farm that wanted to prove that they had free-range pigs. So they put pedometers on each of the animals. And pigs, don't know if you know this about them, have a habit of eating everything. So one of the pigs ate a pedometer. It passed through the body of the pig. And then when it came out the other end, spontaneously combusted and basically set the pig farm on fire. I mean, there is something in like lithium batteries are particularly prone to this, right, Manny?
Yeah. Lithium batteries can be quite hazardous. So lithium metal by itself is an alkali metal. It's very flammable. It's easy for it to catch fire alone. And in lithium batteries, we have three main ingredients: lithium compounds, oxidizers, and we also have hydrocarbons. So what happens is, let's say you're charging up your phone. It might be nighttime, you're in bed, you got your phone on charge, you got it under your pillow. So what's going to happen is, it's going to start heating up.
And in this case, what you really don't want is a short circuit.
Yeah, because literally like at that point, lithium compounds are going to start decomposing and they're going to break down. Now, this reaction is exothermic, so heat energy is released. And as the temperature rises, what we have is thermal runaway, which is where the battery catches fire.
Got a long list of things to avoid now, haven't we?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I can't even fly back to check out the rags because my laptop might explode. But that's presumably why they keep going. Do you have any? That's the reason these are asked on airplane journeys, because you don't want the fire untended in the cargo hold.
So the beauty of a battery is that you're placing a reducer and an oxidizer. And so you have these two halves which are separated by a very thin membrane. And the moment the short circuit happens, you've got the two talking to each other very intimately. And this kind of chemical orgy results in huge exotherm. The thing will expand typically and potentially catch fire.
I think this might be quite a good time to bring on another guest, because joining us remotely, we've got Matt Oakley, who is a fire investigation officer with the Surrey Fire and Rescue. Matt, your whole job is going to the scenes of fires and trying to work out what caused them. How often do you come across spontaneous combustion of the type that we've been talking about?
It happens a lot. There's lots of reasons why things catch fire. So what we're trying to do is investigate all the possible hypotheses that can cause an ignition and eliminate the ones that aren't credible and come up with the one that is. So, we deal with a lot.
What about lithium batteries? I mean, we were talking about thermal runaway in batteries. Do you see that happening?
We do see it an increasing amount. From a fire investigation point of view, we've actually created a database now to kind of monitor this phenomenon with thermal runaway with the lithium batteries. The problem is they are notoriously difficult to control. So to put it in perspective, last year we recorded 55 confirmed fires where the battery was the source of ignition, where the battery has overheated, thermal runaways occurred, the breakdown between the positive and negative side has caused a spark. We've had ignition, but what you also don't know is there are a number of fires where a fire has occurred for other reasons. The fire has then spread to an area where there are lithium batteries stored. Then you get this accelerated runaway where the lithium batteries cause rapid fire development. I mean, they're like missiles. When the casing fails and these batteries fail, we can have multiple ignitions where I've seen one of the hoverboards during COVID had been plugged in lots, and I've gone to a burnt out garage with about 8 seats of fire thinking it's been an attack. And actually I found burnt out lithium battery cells that have literally rocketed out of the device under heat and just
And so,
landed somewhere else and set a fire over there. So it's
Matt, what sort of devices are we talking about here? Just to really get the scare factor up here. What?
Without putting the fear into people, lithium batteries are everywhere. If we buy from a recognised source, they're pretty safe. But why do batteries fail? It's normally an overcharge or an undercharge, which means the wrong charger, the wrong current's being put through it, which is putting the battery under the wrong amount of loading that it's designed to have. So people pulling a charger out of a drawer because the nozzle fits into the hole properly is not necessarily a safe thing to do. It's using the right charger for the right battery. Secondly, it's impact damage. So failure where we've not looked after the batteries properly. They've been dropped, which has caused an internal break in the structure of the battery. So when you then charge it up, the positive and negative side of the battery are already trying to short out. And I'll give you a good example of that one. We attended a fire in a van that caught fire spontaneously on the motorway, and the gentleman's jumped out. We found a load of battery power tools in there. And one of the battery tools looked like the source of ignition. When you ask him about his routine, he said, well, I finish up for the day, and then what I do is I lob all my tools into the back of the van. And so day in, day out, he's chucked all his tools in the back, and gradually impact damage on the battery has led to one of them to fail. And as he's driving along, the battery's just overheated and caught fire. And he's now got a fire in the back of his van as he's driving down the motorway.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
I don't think people know how dangerous this stuff is, because you're saying these things and I do all of them. Like, I just grab a charger from a drawer and plug something in.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and so it's also tools, bikes, presumably, as well?
Yep. So what we've seen now is e-bike conversions, where people have taken the front wheel off their bike, put a new hub on, and they buy a battery pack that goes with it. If you're not buying from a recognised provider, we have a problem. And you think about the type of people who are going to use an electric converted bike, students, people who live in maybe a flat with a communal hallway where security is an issue. So where would people store an electric bike on charge? In their only exit route, which is in the hallway of the entrance hall to their flat. And we've had it before where the fire has occurred and one couple had to jump out of the second floor window of their flat. On this occasion, this was in Guildford. The batteries overheated, thermal runaways occurred. The hallways caught fire very quickly, and the couple are asleep in bed. So the only route out of the house was out of the bedroom window and 2 floors up onto the lawn outside the flats. So they survived, but their flat was completely destroyed. So it's not so much the batteries that cause the batteries will catch fire on occasion, but it's how we use batteries nowadays, which is a real concern. They are day-to-day existence. You've got a phone in your pocket. You know, how often have you had it get slightly warm? I
mean, not exactly easy to make this into a happy clappy episode, is it?
No,
well,
it isn't.
You can do. So it's about human behaviour. About, you know, if I've been out in the sunshine and I feel my battery, the battery on the phone's hot, first thing I do is turn the phone off. Stop the reaction. Stop the power circulating through the battery. Turn it off. Let it cool down. If you've got any kind of swelling in your laptop on the back where the battery's degraded, it's time to get rid of it. So there's lots of things we can do. It's not that batteries are bad because they've been around for 100 years. It's the background story with it about where we've got it from, who we bought it from, has it got previous damage to it, and have we dealt with it responsibly or the right way?
Well, okay, Matt, I mean, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Matt.
No worries. Thanks. Bye-bye.
We've talked about spontaneous combustion in everyday settings in a series of scare stories, by the way. But it can be useful, can't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's also a lot of fun. I mean, the idea that you might be able to start a fire, get a lot of heat and maybe a lot of gas with it, pretty good idea, especially if you want to fire rockets. And so there are certain chemical reactions where you take 2 liquids and you mix them together and they ignite instantly. You get a flame. That's how we actually fly a lot of military missiles, that kind of thing. These are called hypergolic reactions. And I once filmed one of these. I'd never actually properly seen one. And I really didn't know what to expect. And when I put the first drop of the hydrazine into the N2O4, nitrogen dioxide, the thing went quite literally like a rocket, and it scared the pants off me. They're amazing.
Quite a different sort of chalk and cheese.
Yeah, I mean, we've taken a gear change here, definitely. Were you going to demonstrate something for us?
Well, I mean, there's plenty of chemistry out there that is very, very sensitive to oxygen. And what I'm going to show you, so I've got a little bit of hydrochloric acid, and what I've done is prepared magnesium and sand together, and I heated them up until essentially it ignited. And what that does is it makes an interesting compound called magnesium silicide.
Can I just say that you put on some safety goggles, and I think maybe I'll put some on as well.
Yeah, I'm wearing
You're
glasses.
closest.
I'm going to double up glasses and goggles.
Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit, and we might see something when I drop it in there, and then I'll explain. Here we go.
Ooh, it's like a little firework going.
Yeah, it's like sparking and flaming. And
Isn't it beautiful?
it's lovely.
It makes a tiny little wisp of smoke, so I'm just going to put a beaker on top.
So that
Do it
is
again.
interesting then, because
again.
separately you have what looks like a jar of a clear liquid, not doing anything, and you've got this sort of, I mean, it looks like grey sand, what you have here, but put them together and you're seeing these sparks literally fly.
Absolutely. So what's happening here is that the compound in there, magnesium silicide, reacts with the acid and it produces silane, SiH4. It's like methane, as in natural gas, with silicon instead. And that reacts with oxygen instantly, produces lots of heat, and that's where the flame comes from. Then it goes out because there's very little fuel there, and that's why we've been allowed to do it here in the studio. I wanted to do it with a shovel and a swimming pool, but the budget didn't extend to it. So.
Yeah, nor will the BBC health and safety regulations, presumably.
But it is quite pretty, isn't it?
It is lovely, actually. There are various chemicals, Manny, that do have this auto-igniting property. Pyrophoric substances. Is that the technical term for them? Do you use them in your videos?
Yeah, definitely. So, like, I use a lot of alkali metals in my videos. Metals like lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium. These alkali metals are actually used in fireworks because they each burn with a different colour. So, for example, lithium is going to give you a nice crimson red flame. Sodium is going to give you yellow. Potassium, like a lilac purple. That's why they use them in fireworks. So what I normally do with them is I just like get a little bit of sodium or potassium, drop it into some water, and you get a nice explosion with the different colours as well. Now, the most reactive metal on the periodic table is called francium metal. It's an alkali metal as well. It's so reactive that it can only exist for a maximum of 20 minutes because it actually breaks down and decomposes into another chemical, another element, because of how reactive and radioactive it is. And that's not a lot of time, so we don't really know much about it. But the one below that, cesium, I've done experiments with cesium before. So it's so reactive, that as soon as you open the vial, it explodes instantly because it reacts with the oxygen and moisture in the atmosphere.
Have you put cesium in water, Manny?
You know what? I couldn't actually put the cesium in water. I had to put the water on the cesium because it would have just reacted before I had a chance to even drop it in there.
Right, I've got a pitch for a video, okay?
Yeah?
A shovel, cesium in a swimming pool, okay?
Wow.
Has to be done.
That's going to be a massive explosion.
Expensive, though. Expensive.
I think we can accept so far. Spontaneous combustion occurs.
Yes.
It is a genuine, serious issue that occurs. And intriguingly, both in ancient trades like agriculture and very much in our modern life that we've made battery dependent. Honestly, everything we do is at some stage waiting to erupt, and that's fine. So, surely there is a version of spontaneous human combustion.
I mean, surely.
Surely.
Right? Surely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Roger Byard is a professor of pathology at the University of Adelaide in Australia, and he's also a forensic pathologist. So he is exactly the person that we need to be asking about this. He's done lots of work with spontaneous human combustion. Have a listen to this.
First time I ever encountered spontaneous human combustion was when I was a student I was 18 years old and I was fruit picking in central Tasmania. And the hut that my friend and I were staying in used to be occupied by an old man who we were told had died of spontaneous human combustion about 3 weeks before. So that was my first encounter. And then many years later, I was reading about a coroner in Galway in Ireland in 2011. And he had a case and he said that the only possible conclusion he could come up with was spontaneous human combustion. So I thought, well, if senior medico-legal people believe in it, how many other people do? And so I went to write about it and to research it and to show that it is basically a very long-standing urban myth. What happens is people are found dead in a house and only their legs and arms may be left and everything else is burnt. And there's all sorts of soot and it's really been a very obviously long-standing smouldering fire. And so people said, well, this must be spontaneous. And particularly in France, several hundred years ago, there were a number of cases, and people said that it was basically a visitation of God. And then other people came up with the idea that basically it was spontaneous explosions inside people. And there was a British surgeon in the 19th century who said, no, it's helium and hydrogen produced in the colon, and it's a burning eructation. He was quite convinced with this theory. But the type of person that's typically involved is an obese, elderly white female who lives on her own. She's wrapped up in blankets, smoking and drinking spirits. And what we think now happens is that these people drop their cigarette, they probably spilled a bit of spirits, and it acts like a wick effect. So there's this smouldering fire and they just slowly incinerate. Now, people have said, well, you can't burn a body at a low temperature. Once fat starts burning, it can burn at very low temperatures. And it does take a while. It's a long process. And it explains why nothing else around them is burnt. It's because the fire is contained within the blankets. One of the important things about spontaneous human combustion is it's never been witnessed. Now, it's been around for hundreds of years, and yet if it was a medical event, people would be bursting into flames in the supermarket, at footy matches or walking down the street. They don't. It's always people who are on their own. I mean, it's been in literature. Dickens in Bleak House had it, Melville had it. People have described it everywhere. People want to believe in something as unusual as this, but it's an urban myth.
Sorry.
Yeah, I accept it. To be honest, I don't hear that.
Is this what?
We all believed it in the 70s, but by the 80s somebody had done a thing and said, what is a sadder case basically that people are often overcome by the fumes when the burning starts, whatever, so they're very much knocked out for when this occurs. And then it happens post-mortem, essentially, that the body slowly burns. So no, we have to accept that it isn't in the sense of there being some greater power struck a lightning bolt and the whole thing evaporated in seconds. But, I mean, there's a lot of rewording, stuff that I think we could still call spontaneous combustion.
I think what remains is to thank all of our guests today, Andrea Sella, Manny Wallace, Matt Oakley and Roger Byard.
So the upshot, basically, is that we've settled for people that there isn't spontaneous human combustion, but that everything else in your life might explode. I mean, the grass, the hay, your bike, your phone, your laptop, things you plug in and things that just grow. Everything is just the stuff under your house.
And sort of everything in between, frankly.
It's all just ready to go.
Oh, those rags? No.
Yeah. Oh,
no.
the rags. I forgot the rags.
Do you know what we should have done when we had the experts here is just get them to give us a white list, Because I think the more we start digging, the more we go, is there anything that we can be safe with?
Yeah, always ready to go at a moment's notice. Just every so often, just go through life, just putting your hand onto things and going, oh, I feel a bit warm. And seeing if you could in any way cool it down.
You know how you're going to write in a question for the episode of Poltergeist from Dora Noah Brown?
Yeah, Dora Brown.
I think I might write one in, actually from myself, of what is the least flammable thing? And then,
can I live in it?
Proceed to completely surround myself by it and never leave.
Oh, dear. And on that note.
Sleep soundly, everybody.
Subscribe to Curious Cases on BBC Sounds and make sure you've got push notifications turned on, and we'll let you know as soon as new episodes are available.
Hello, I'm Brian Cox.
I'm Robin Ince, and we're back for a new series of The Infinite Monkey Cage. We have our 201st extravaganza, where we're going to talk about how animals emote when around trains and tunnels, or something like that. I'm not entirely sure.
We're doing one on potatoes.
Of course we're doing one on potatoes. You love potatoes.
I know, but...
Yeah, you love chips, you love mash.
I'll only enjoy it if it's got curry sauce on it.
We've also got techno-fossils, moths versus butterflies, and a history of light. That'll do, won't it?
Listen first on BBC Sounds.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
This BBC podcast is supported by ads outside the UK.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
I'm Hannah Fry.
And I'm Dara O'Brien.
And this is Curious Cases.
The show where we take your quirkiest questions,
your crunchiest conundrums,
and then we solve them.
With the power of science.
I mean, do we always solve them?
I mean, the hit rate's pretty low.
But it is with science.
It is with science. Dara.
Yes.
You know how sometimes our listeners write in with what feels like wacky, off-the-wall ideas, but actually end up being grounded in scientific fact and genuinely could make good businesses?
Yeah, our listeners do that.
If you're an angel investor...
This is the way you got to be, honestly. We are throwing money away here.
If only the British government would see us as the source of the future of science and
All
technology
innovation.
in the country.
Yeah.
Innovation. Anyway, Wayne Jacobs has come up with an idea he thinks is going to make him a very, very rich person indeed. He asks, if you painted a Formula One car in a matte nano paint so that it resembled the pattern and texture of shark skin, would it have less air resistance and go faster? He goes on to say, we know the rough pattern on shark skin helps it to cut through the water better. So maybe at a nano level, a paint could do this on any object travelling through air. By the way, he used to work for a racing car manufacturer.
So it's not just a wild idea. This
is. I think he could be on something.
I mean, could it also be shaped like a shark? And make they play the Jaws music as it went around the track?
I think if the Formula One drivers, just for one race a season, actually rode on the backs of sharks.
I think one Formula One every year should be wacky races. All the cars have... meh, meh, kind of those horns, that you squeeze or whatever, and they're just silly contraptions with wings flapping
Absolutely.
up and down. Yeah,
occasional fire blasting across the track.
Yeah, wacky races are Mario Kart.
Oh, sure, you're right.
Yeah.
Two things are synonymous in my mind. Do you know, by the way, that I used to work in Formula One? Have I mentioned this to you?
You have not mentioned that to me.
I just don't like to brag.
Were you on the? Were you one of those people taking the tires off?
I was a grid girl. I could not be further away from a grid girl in every direction. No, I was an aerodynamicist. Do you want to know how long I lasted?
How long did you last?
About 2 months.
Okay.
So we're going to see how that extensive knowledge that I built up over that time is going to come into play.
Luckily, we have people with us who can definitely tell us whether Wayne is onto something.
Dr. Jess Wade is a lecturer in functional materials at Imperial College London.
And Manish Tiwari is a professor of nanoengineering at University College London. Both of them interested in how structures occur naturally can help us build better materials at the nano scale. Manish, we think of sharks, I think of sharks having smooth, shiny skin, but that's not what's happening, is it?
No, not really. It's amazing how fascinating they are. So, in fact, if you look closely, they are covered with these things called dermal denticles, which I think translates into skin teeth, literally.
Right.
So they have these structures that are very similar to dentin, this protein.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you have enamel, which is exactly the material that we have in our teeth as well. And they're hard, and they're very well oriented. And they vary all the way from the tip of a shark to the backside. It's amazing.
Sharks are already frightening enough animals without knowing that their skin is just covered in teeth.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, but we're talking tiny. We
are really talking tiny. So it's anywhere from, let's say, 1/10 of a millimeter to about 1 millimeter. Depends on the species and so on. I mean, sharks have been around for 350 million years, so they've had some time to adjust. And
they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing, exactly.
And is it like a layer of scales? Susanna?
That's right. So actually, they are different form of a scale that we would expect in a fish, except these are hard because these are very predatory. So it's useful to have this teeth-like structure to protect themselves against other sharks that might be attacking them and things like that.
Okay.
But they have this other beautiful property that you would not expect our teeth to do, which is to reduce drag, which I suspect is what we will talk about.
Well, we should probably say there are different types of drag going on here. At the sort of bigger scale, the scale of the shark itself,
Sure.
I mean, that is like a beautifully tuned animal as well.
The maximal effect in terms of drag reduction does indeed come from the streamlined shape, which we call foam drag. So that's due to the pressure difference between the front of the fish to the back. And then there is this friction, which is what you would expect as well. If, a bit of water is flowing past the surface, you would expect a bit of friction. So there is at least 2 different kinds. Aerospace engineers or naval engineers will give you 7 or 8 different types, but those are the broad types.
I mean, we'll talk about the frictional drag for this because obviously the Formula 1 cars are going to keep coming back to us with this have their shape. It's whether or not they can gain an advantage from this having similar kind of surface as the sharks have. What is it doing on the surface of the shark?
This is particularly useful because sharks can actually swim pretty fast, so they can get into what are called turbulent flows. So this is like chaotic flow when things will go really fast. And what happens then is you have these nice circular flow patterns, which are called eddies. And when you have this teeth-like structure, which is appropriately shaped, you can start to lock these eddies on surface, which starts to reduce the drag in a really rapid flow. You wouldn't expect a rough structure to do that, would you? Particularly if it is randomly rough. So that's why these skin teeth have this nice groove-like structure that are able to actually trap vortices. And that helps reduce the drag, particularly when they're going fast. And because it's a living animal, they actually undulate. So these teeth can actually go up and down. And so they actually adjust themselves as they're flowing through.
See, my understanding of eddies, and I defer to the other person hosting this show, like whatever in this. If you've got a basin of water and you run your hand through it and you can see the water swirling off behind it.
That's exactly the eddy. What sharks tend to do naturally with this eddy and trapping them is they create this nice slippery layer, because water can be slippery if you can manage to trap it there, right? So that's where the slippery effect is coming from. And it happens because they can adjust, they can do a much better job of actually retaining those eddies, if you will.
The way you're describing it, it sounds quite a lot like the idea behind a golf ball, in the sense that, okay, you want a golf ball to travel really far, and so you don't want the friction of the air to slow it down as much as you possibly can. So you could try and get a beautifully smooth ball, lovely, nice and slippery, and it would go further. But instead, they're like, hang on a second, the slipperiest thing of all that we have access to is air. So let's create these dimples, get little pockets of air inside them, and then the slipperiness. So it's the same idea then?
It's exactly the same idea. And it's something that helps trap the boundary layer, which is a layer of friction that develops when any fluid flows past the surface, which is where the friction effects are kind of important. And what happens is, as this fluid flows, sometimes due to pressure difference, that layer separates. And that increases the drag dramatically. So by creating these dimples, we are able to delay the separation of boundary layer.
So are we using, is the shark using, I suppose, would be the better question, but are we using turbulence in order to decrease the drag?
I love that way of thinking. Yes, indeed.
That's very smart. If you create a layer, a cloak of bubbling, swirling...
Controlled vortices.
Controlled vortices, that's it.
Yeah, and that means that the actual large body moves past you more smoothly.
Exactly.
Well, that's very smart.
And it's actually even more smart because the sharks will undulate as they swim, right? So these controlled vortex pattern, it changes along the body of the shark. so it can be a lot more efficient. They can reduce drag by 10 to 12%, which is a big deal.
That's massive.
Yeah, it's massive.
Okay, Jess, let me come to you here, because I know that it's not only shark skin that has this property, right?
Sure. Loads of things have awesome nanostructures and microstructures.
Talk to me.
So if you have a lotus leaf, there you've got various different length scales of structures, from kind of microstructures, these papillae, which are formed in the epidermis, the cells around the outside of that plant. Those kind of have micron scales, a thousandth of a metre. But if you zoom even closer than that, you have these nanostructures overlaid on that of these kind of little wax crystallites that kind of protrude from the surface. And that modifies the surface properties. So you've got a microstructure. On top of that, you've got this kind of nanostructure. And in that case, you're not trying to change drag or anything like that. You're actually trying to make it hydrophobic. So you're trying to make it water hating, so that if a droplet of water lands on the top of that lotus leaf, it can't kind of spread out in the way that a water droplet usually does when it lands on a surface. It kind of sits there like a perfect sphere. And actually then you have these nano hairs on top of that push the water droplet off. So when you have a droplet of water landing on it, the interaction between dirt on the lotus leaf and the water is stronger than between the dirt on the leaf and the leaf. So the act of water dropping on it will move that dirt off, which is amazing.
A self-drying leaf.
Self-drying, self-cleaning, you name it. Lotus leaf is doing it. And they're super sophisticated things in insect legs, so they can use that to kind of propel across water as well.
Water boatmen, is that what they're called?
Water boatmen, sure.
Where they can sit on top of the...
Yeah, little skippers who kind of skim across the surface. Yeah, they're just amazing.
And that, again, is because their feet are hydrophobic.
And their legs have these kind of nanostructures within them that help them propel and push water away from them. So if you have a droplet of water, to minimise the surface energy of that droplet, it will be a sphere, because geometrically that would minimise the surface energy. If it sits on a surface that's hydrophobic, that has these incredibly intricate structures, it can't spread out. You actually get these air pockets that form on the surface that push that water droplet upwards. The leaf can do it, but also the legs of these insects can do it, can push the water away from them so that they can propel across the surface of water.
So are there other insects that can do this, man?
Absolutely. Butterfly is my favourite example, actually.
Butterflies never get wet.
Exactly, one. And secondly, they can actually take impacts of water droplet, which is a lot harder problem to do. So they exist in, rainforests, for example, where things come down at tens of meters per second.
And big fat ploppy rain as
exactly,
well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we used to have a lot of butterflies in India, which has got a tropical climate. And I would like to confess that I probably might have broken wings of quite a few of them. So they are quite flimsy, right? So they should not be able to take impacts of water droplets in monsoon rain, yet they do, because they have the kind of structure that Jez was talking about, and they're floppy, they're flexible, so they're able to sag down a little bit as the droplet falls down. And so you have this mechanics and combination of macro and nanostructure that combines together in order to give you the property.
When we say nano, how small are we talking?
So our hair, depending on the hair...
Yeah, that was the benchmark I was going to pick. Belgium for big things, hair for small
I've got
things.
A good one. So it's a billionth of a metre. It's how far your nails grow in 1 second.
That's it.
So every second your nails grow 1 nanometre.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah.
So your hair is on a huger scale than that.
Way huger scale than that.
Okay. And paint, for example. If you put one layer of paint up or whatever, that's way beyond...
Way beyond the nano regime. You're in microns.
Okay. So when we talk about mimicking this stuff, we're talking about incredibly thin layers.
Incredibly thin structures. When we're talking about kind of what's on an insect's leg or on the surface of a lotus leaf, they're kind of little hairs and little structures. In a butterfly, for example, the structure is often what gives it its colour, because the length scales over which you're seeing these cool features start to interact with visible light. So you'll have something that doesn't have actually any pigment colour. It's only when light shines on it and interacts with that kind of grating or that surface that it becomes colourful at all. Which is why when you go to the Natural History Museum and look at all the butterflies, they retain their colour even when they die, because the colour is coming from the structure, not from a pigment.
There are other structures, though, right? I'm thinking about chiral structures here.
Yeah, sure.
That plays into this as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super interested in chirality in general. Chirality, for everyone who's not a chiral enthusiast, is a property of symmetry and shape. And chiral objects exist as a pair of non-superimposable mirror images, so left and right-handed. But we see chirality a lot in plants and a lot of barks of trees and in even some insects' fibres in some ways, to try and impart some strength. So having some kind of chiral assembly or packing can make things more strong or make things more robust and resistant to wind or make things grow in a particular direction.
So I'm imagining sort of hairs like down at this scale of like how fast your nails are growing. And rather than just having them straight, if you have them as spirals, some going in some direction, some going in the other direction, you end up improving the structure of it.
Sometimes you'll have spirals that one will grow one way and one will grow the other way. And I suppose that would probably impart some greater strength. But also it will control how they interact with air, and air moves over their surface. And I think you can probably direct air in a clever way if you have some chiral nanostructure or chiral microstructure at least on top of a surface.
It's a very interesting idea, definitely. And depending on the speed of the air also, right? Because if you go back to the shark teeth, it's also about different species having different sizes of teeth. So I would imagine it'll come down to the speed at which the air is flowing as well. It's fascinating that you go down in terms of length scale and you start to have different kinds of interaction with fluid and light and what have you.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
In a beetle shell, you have a material called chitin, which is this kind of biopolymer, and it stacks in this beetle shell so that every layer of this chitin is twisted a little bit with respect to the one below. So you get this build-up of this kind of twisted assembly. And what happens in this beetle shell is if you shine light on the back of it, it reflects back to you and it's twisted light because of the packing structure of that chitin. Our eyes can't see twisted light, but 3D cinema glasses can see twisted light. So if you look through 3D cinema glasses and you look with one lens, you'll be able to see the colour of the beetle. And if you look through the other lens, you can't see the colour at all. And that's because the light that's coming back from this beetle is entirely twisted from the nanostructure of that chitin. So I'll show it to you.
So is one of these polarised one way, one of them's polarised the other?
Yeah, their 3D cinema glasses have a kind of clockwise and an anti-clockwise lens, and that gives you the perception of depth when you're watching 3D movies.
Got you.
But if you take one lens at a time...
Which one's
do the disappointing one first. That's what I always do scientifically.
Oh, God, they're just black.
It's incredible, right?
That's very boring.
But
that's because the twist in the lens is opposite to the twist
of the light being reflected.
Okay. Oh, what? That is
mind-blowing.
Really? I mean, they look so much
and just
more
these little
disgusting
beetles.
when they're black, by the way.
These little beetles can do this. It's an amazing thing.
I should describe what I'm seeing here. So these beetles, they're kind of emerald green, but they've got a sheen to them, like an kind of orangey metallic undertone. They're very, very beautiful until you look at them through the bad lens, in which case they just basically look like someone's got a bad problem with cockroaches.
So we have all these fantastic examples from nature of these things happening on a nano scale. But can we recreate this? Can we make this happen for ourselves?
We're so far not quite as good at nature at doing it for a long time, at making kind of durable and stable nanostructures. So the remarkable thing about lotus leaves or beetles or butterflies is that these nanostructures persist. You know, the lotus leaves can kind of self-heal if something happens to them. They can reform these bonds that will let this kind of super hydrophobic, in that case, scenario happen. We have to study and understand these nanostructures. So a lot of the time scientists do electron microscopy, so using electron microscopes rather than light microscopes to get this really precise nanoscale structural information, and then find different ways to try and grow them. You can kind of crudely make a nanomaterial from starting with a big material and smashing it up. So you have a kind of top-down approach, which doesn't produce these beautiful complex nanostructures that we're talking about here, but could make you nanoparticles if you wanted them for some particular application where you don't care so much if they're all consistent size. Or you can do some chemistry, so you can start to prepare things and let nanoparticles and nanostructures kind of nucleate out of a solution and do things like that. Or you can do some kind of nanofabrication techniques where you're really precisely controlling the size and the dimensions of these nanostructures that you create. In some cases, moving individual atoms, in some cases, using a kind of patterned photomask.
Sorry. Moving. Have you got tweezers for individual atoms?
Little tiny microscopes, not light microscopes, but either electron microscopes or atomic force microscopes. You can start to play around on those length scales. But I suppose you want to meet somewhere in the middle where you've been able to do the sophisticated nanoengineering, but you can scale it. You can say, we want to make a nanomaterial that we can put on commercial air flights to reduce drag, or we want to make something that we can make super hydrophobic. We can't just move every atom every time we want to build one of these things.
Okay, could you actually do this for the shark skin / teeth?
Yes, there's a number of companies that are trying to make structures that are microscale but can be done in a scalable manner. So you can take a sheet of plastic, really, then you can have very similar effect to what shark does. Well, not as elegant and not as dynamic as shark is able to do, because it has had a bit more time than we do. But we can actually start to learn the fluid mechanics of what is happening at this scale and use those principles to come up with structures that may be different, maybe easier to make, or do it in a way that can be practically scalable, or last on an airplane, or survive on an airplane, which the shark, for all its greatness, does not need to do.
That's interesting you mention that, because there are companies who are attempting to do this. One of them is Lufthansa, which has designed a nanofilm that sticks to the underside of its planes. This is Sebastian Hartwig from BASF Systems, the company that came up with this idea, explaining how it works.
When you look at the shark skin, there is a repetitive pattern on the skin surface of the shark. And there are certain grooves on the structure, and these grooves, they are all oriented in parallel to the water stream. And it's exactly this orientation and these grooves that are reducing the skin friction of the shark. So you have a very precise structure in the micrometer range with the riblet. And riblets are the extraction of all the geometry to something that can be industrialized. So we have developed this technology where we can press the structure into a material in a film which is 100-something microns thick. It's not 3D printed or etched or lasered or whatever one may think. It's an imprint technology. It's a self-adhering film, so it's like a large sticker, like a 50 times 100 centimeter sticker, and you can apply this easily on any kind of a surface. We are currently equipping the fuselage of the aircraft, and this reduces the drag or makes the aircraft more efficient by around about 1%. And we are working on extending the surface to more or less the entire aircraft surface where it makes sense. And by this, we can increase from roughly 1% to 3%. So when we are talking of a Boeing 777, it saves per aircraft per year around about 400 tons of kerosene, saving you around about 1,200, 250 tons of CO2 emissions.
We actually have some of the film here. I mean, I'm holding up a metal plate on which there is an incredibly thin film on the top. And if you run your finger along it, just straight along it, it just feels like a normal surface. But if you try to divert it, it sort of catches you and pushes you back into that straight line again.
I'm going to actually let Jess go first, because the level of excitement on her face as she was describing her, the actual nanoscientist in the room.
Yeah.
Okay, just doing a few of the parallels just to feel it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's so weird.
It is strange,
like an optical illusion, but with your hands. That's amazing.
Yeah. That's a perfect way to describe it.
A real sensation of grip.
Because if you run your finger back and forth, I mean, you
can tell there's anything,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But this is enough to save 1,250 tons of carbon.
Absolutely.
Thank you, nanoscience.
I mean, that is, small things make a big difference.
Well, really small things make a big difference. There's an intermediate size regime that doesn't change that much.
But would it work for cars?
People are trying. I should say with limited success, because on cars we have other things to worry about as well. They're a lot more tactile. People like to touch them. There is issues around contamination of dust and other things that might complicate matters as well.
You just describe people as being tactile with their cars, which sort of to me means people are stroking them. But would I be damaging this surface by running my finger across it?
That's right. So that's one of the biggest problems that nanotechnology has. So when we start to make things small, we might also make them weak. So one of the challenges that this type of technology will face is how do we make it such that it is useful, it has the property that we want it to offer, but it doesn't make itself too weak to last.
Does that mean that we finally discovered the shark's greatest weakness? Stroke its back.
Because no one thinks to do that. when a great white is coming towards you, no one thinks if I just
Give him a diagonal stroke, I'm going to really throw this guy off.
Is there also an element of the fact that what the shark is swimming through is so much more dense than what you'd be driving a car through?
That's right. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that it's a lot more viscous, and that has an effect as well. So
there's more scope there for making gains.
Absolutely. And there's another layer of innovation that sharks have. Because we are talking actually about skin of an animal, there is something called mucus layer that sits on top of the denticles that we were talking about, which gives it the slippery effect on top of the structural effects that were responsible for the vortices.
Just picking up on the mucus, so a sentence I love saying.
Let's bring it back to the mucus.
This is a bit like, I don't know, oiling the golf ball in a way. What's the advantage? Is it an aerodynamic advantage?
Well, it's the friction advantage that we were talking about earlier. Because it's a liquid-like layer, if the fluid tries to go past it, it will start to become slippery. I was going to say, if you imagine walking over, a layer of mucus, we might actually slip. Right? So it's that slippery effect as well, on top of all the fluid mechanics related effects that we were talking about earlier. And both of those are kind of important, feels like, for shark's case.
Is that an idea that we can copy? Can we have a layer on top of something?
Yes, we can actually. So to what we were talking about earlier about lotus leaves, a lot of scientists across the globe have been actually trying to replicate what lotus leaf does that through natural evolutionary processes. So this is a normal cotton fabric with bit of cloth, exactly, that has a layer of coating that has nanostructure, and that makes it incredibly slippery. So if we try to actually put a water droplet on top of it, we'll find hard time doing that actually.
This is beautifully hydrophobic.
That's so neat.
So that's just beading straight off.
That's it.
So imagine if you've got, I don't know, like a waxed jacket where when you put water on it, instead of the water soaking in, these are like forming beads on top and then just running straight off.
That's it.
What clever thing have you done to this cotton to make that happen?
It's very similar to a lotus leaf, etc. Except in this case, we actually grow these materials directly onto this piece of fabric and it becomes super hydrophobic now. So for example, the non-stick pans at home, they've got a lot of Teflon in them. And that we now know has got adverse effect on health. It tends to persist in the environment for a long time and so on, although it has this beautiful slippery property. So could we get that effect using materials that are environmentally safe?
And the nanopan, as I've decided to call it, the nanopan is the new cooking ware range I'm launching, where it's all on a nano level. Yeah, you'd have a metal pan or whatever, and then you'd place a layer, then an incredibly thin layer of something on top.
Exactly
of that.
Right. And to maintain all the slipperiness, etc., that we are used to, because we don't like to clean pans and stuff.
No, we really don't, and that's the nanopan guarantee. How much of this is looking at great examples from nature and going, well, how are we going to do that?
A lot of it.
Yeah.
And then it's, how are we going to do that? Let's go and speak to some chemists who know how to make these weird and wonderful molecules. Then let's speak to some physicists and material scientists and learn how we nail those properties. Let's go to electronic engineering. And then let's write funny things in it using our lasers or whatever you can do to just have a laugh in the lab. And then you may commercialise it.
And then you take it to the marketing department and say, Nanopan is a great name.
Yeah. We're going to take that from you now.
No, you can't. No. This is me putting that. I'm signing it to myself in an envelope, and I'm sealing the envelope now. I own that.
If you did manage to make this paint, right, for Nanopan, where would this be most useful? I mean, I'm thinking about how you were saying with the shark, the viscosity of the water, the fact that it travels at speed, all of those things really matter. Would it be on ships that it would be helpful?
Oh, definitely. So one of the problems that ships have is growth of barnacles, which increases drag and, leads to corrosion and what have you. So if you could actually protect all of that from growing, you would save a lot of fuel there too. There are other applications, domestic usage. So for example, if we could have jackets that don't allow water contamination and so on, it'll lead to a lot less cleaning, which means a lot less usage of things like detergents and so on. All of that feeds into sustainability as well. So there is use of this stuff pretty much everywhere we look.
And in buildings, right?
Absolutely.
To try and get self-cleaning buildings and windows that will clean and things like that.
But then can you use a similar effect for cooling? I mean, I'm thinking about like sunlight hitting buildings and warming them up. And is there a possibility there?
Funny you would say that, actually. So people are actually working on that. There are materials which radiate at certain wavelength where the atmosphere is transparent, meaning it does not absorb that wavelength. So if you can imagine having a paint which absorbs all the sunlight and radiates back where the atmosphere will not absorb it back, it's this principle called radiative cooling. Then you could imagine cooling buildings down completely passively. There is no moving parts or anything like that. But it's not as efficient as we would like it to be, for it to be useful for building cooling, but people are working on it.
Okay, you know what? I think we've not just come up with one multi-million man idea.
And we've even forgotten the original, the Formula One thing.
Forget about Formula One. Who cares about fast cars?
He wasn't thinking big enough. By the way, sorry, just to answer his question though, would a coating of something and anything really help a Formula One car?
Not immediately, but we shouldn't rule out the possibility.
It could.
It could.
Okay.
Don't know if that's enough for you, angel investors.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much to our guests, Dr. Jess Wade and Professor Manish Tiwari. Okay, well, the point of this programme was to see whether our questioner Wayne had a multi-million pound mega idea, and it turns out he might not, but
I do. Sorry about that, Wayne. That's how innovation works. It goes fast. And somebody goes, well, the original idea probably came from Formula One, but then I changed it into the nanopan, and it'll be a range then. It'll be a whole range.
Sure,
yeah. Oh,
sure.
yeah.
And all you've got to do between now and then, very simple, just work out how to structure these objects down at the scale where light doesn't even have colour.
Subscribe to Curious Cases on BBC Sounds and make sure you've got push notifications turned on, and we'll let you know as soon as new episodes are available.
I'm Matthew Side, and Sideways, my podcast from BBC Radio 4, brings you stories of seeing the world differently.
From that moment on, I feel like my life and the way that I view life itself just shifted, literally.
Stories about the ideas that shape our lives.
If an missile had come down and killed us all, it wouldn't have mattered. It was just me in a moment of bliss in the middle of a war zone.
Stories about everything from the ethics of using AI to simulate conversations with the dead to viewing decay as a vehicle for rebirth. Listen to Sideways, first on BBC Sounds.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
This BBC podcast is supported by ads outside the UK.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
I'm Hannah Fry.
And I'm Dara O'Brien.
And this is Curious Cases.
The show where we take your quirkiest questions,
your crunchiest conundrums,
and then we solve them.
With the power of science.
I mean, do we always solve them?
I mean, the hit rate's pretty low.
But it is with science.
It is with science. Welcome back to Curious Cases. We have got a musical question for you today. Time for us to get our groove on, which, as we'll discover, Dara, is a technical term.
Is that all this time? I've been incorrectly using that scientific term.
Flippantly, you've been using it.
That's a pity, actually, yeah. Are you musical?
I mean, I don't like to brag, but I have been known to bang out 3 blind mice on a recorder.
Yeah, the recorder is very much the non-musical instrument.
I think that's your answer then, isn't it?
Yeah. It's more of a kind of a high-pitched drone, really. It's like, yeah.
You know, if you imagine Theresa May dancing...
Oh, that's...
okay.
Wow.
That's how all mathematicians dance, I think.
That's my nightmare. I close my eyes at night and get that jerking, awkward, arrhythmic thing.
Now I want you to see that, but with my face on it.
Okay, fine.
All of this is relevant to the question that we have today. A question that's come in from Dan Schillerbeer.
Hi, I'm Dan, and I've been thinking about time. What's the internal clock we call rhythm? Why are some of us better percussionists than others? I regard people who can play drums or play the piano as getting lucky consistently, because I have no idea how they do those things. If you gave me 2 drumsticks, I would just give you background noise. It's appalling.
I want to know how musical you are, Dara.
Well, I like rhythm. I like beat. What's interesting to me is I can never translate that into the coordination, the jump from what's the clock in your head to your fingers. That is, I'd also like to ask about as well.
What about dancing, though? Can you do that?
I have been known to dance, but I think it's a thing that one should never review or have seen. Yeah.
Interesting how you might say that, though, because I actually, knowing that you had a penchant for a little bit of boogieing.
Yeah.
I actually found a little video of you online. If you Google Dara Brian dancing, have you ever look at this? It's
just for people who can say, I can't see the screen you're looking at, nor will I ever. It is one of those activities which is.
It's a red nose.
No, please don't tilt it. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. I genuinely don't want to see it.
It's a red nose.
I've lived it. I don't want to see it.
I've got to be honest. I mean, you're giving it your all.
Thank you. That's in a recording studio here. That's not actually properly doing it. Like Dan, I've always wondered why some of us can drop and do the worm or can follow a beat while others have 2 left feet. And we've got a couple of people to help us investigate today's musical mystery. Professor Nina Kraus is a neuroscientist who studies how the brain processes music and sound.
And Dr. Maria Vitek is a cognitive psychologist who focuses on music perception. And Maria, you study groove.
I do, yeah.
Hey.
I'm a doctor of groove.
What's the definition?
So if you want to use a psychological definition of groove, it's actually a sensation. It's the feeling of a pleasurable wanting to move to a beat.
Okay. I mean, way to get academic about something that we all innately enjoy. Well, speaking of cool jobs, we have also got Mark Richardson here, who is a drummer for the rock band Skunk Anansie. How would you describe your music, Mark? Sort of like Britpop's noisy, louder cousin.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, we were kind of alongside the Britpop thing, doing our own kind of indie, loud, quiet thing.
And thank you for bringing in your drum kit today, staring at us ominously from across the other side of the studio.
No worries.
Let's start with some basics. What do we mean when we say rhythm?
Rhythm is a pattern over time, a pattern of durations over time. And it's hard to define rhythm without defining a beat alongside it. So you think of the beat as that underlying framework, that regular framework, and the rhythm is the pattern that lies over top, of the sequence of sounds that we hear in relation to the beat underneath it.
What is it about humans that makes us attracted to rhythms then?
So rhythm is part of our environment. When you think about the way that we walk is very rhythmic. We have the kind of rhythmic alternation of light and darkness over the course of 24 hours. Our heart rates are rhythmic. So there's lots of kind of rhythmic information in the environment that we synchronize to and that our attentions are drawn to. Rhythm is definitely something that is just part of humans' environments and animals' environments as well.
But talking specifically about music, why is rhythm in music so important to us?
So rhythm sort of provides a kind of framework with which we can quite quickly engage with music, right? Like you can hear a beat after 2-3 beats, you're already catching on to that regularity.
Like you're predicting what's coming next.
Yes, exactly. Prediction is a really important part of rhythm. So in order to be able to perceive that underlying beat, that massively relies on your expectations over time. Those expectations and that prediction of these regular beats not only allows us to perceive it, but also allows us to move along to it. And so rhythm is a really basic element of music that quite quickly invites participation from listeners and dancers and musicians, etc. There are different kinds of complexity in music. Some music might have what we call isochronous rhythm, so when the beats are equally spaced. Some rhythms might have more complex rhythms like polyrhythms or non-isochronous beats. Some music might have no regularity, like experimental kind of contemporary music. Some music, like folk music in Norway, will have that regular beat underlying it, but it's not strictly on the beat. It will kind of swell in time at certain points. And also even certain hip-hop music or music like Skunk Anansi would play might be, a drummer might play a little bit late or a little bit early. So the drums are not equally spaced. They're a little bit more flexible.
I'm thinking about how much music is enjoyed sort of collectively, or how easy it is for, say, an audience of people to synchronise clapping together. Is that part of it, that you need that regularity in order to be able to find sync?
Absolutely. So yes, there are many kind of theories about, the kind of evolutionary development of rhythm. And one of them is that we develop to be able to perceive these beats and to make these beats because of the social significance of them. Because when we move along to these beats, we don't just synchronize to the rhythm, we also synchronize to the other people around us. And so when we synchronize with other people around us, we become more similar to them, and the other people become more predictable. And so you can say that there's a kind of almost like a blurring between yourself and the people around you. So there's a really strong social significance for rhythm and synchrony that may explain why we have rhythm in music today.
Nina, this mechanism of rhythm as a conformity device, is that a thing you've seen as well?
Well, yeah. So if I've got sensors and I'm measuring the electrical activity between you and another musician playing together, or you and your audience, our brain waves actually synchronize. They synchronize to the music, they synchronize to each other. Earlier you were talking about detecting deviations and anticipating what you think is going to happen. Well, our nervous system is really good at detecting regularities, and it will also notice, because it's really important. Think about sound. If there's a regular sound and then there's a deviation, which might signal a predator, it might signal something fun, who knows, your nervous system will respond. Our neurons actually do something called phase locking, which is they will respond in synchrony, in time, with a regular beat. But if you have this nice regular beat as a background, then you can pick up on syncopation. You can pick up on an irregularity, which might signal danger.
Interesting. There's a drumming festival I know in Spain where different villages send drumming teams out and they drum against each other. They pick a particular rhythm and they have to drum against each other. And eventually, and this can take some time, one of them is subsumed into the other. One conforms to the other's rhythm. They can't hold their beat against the other beat because the other one is just simply too, it overpowers them, and then they win. It's this mechanism as a competition.
It's called entrainment. Take a couple of metronomes and put them on a board. And if you have them going in different times to start with, over time, they will entrain and you will find a similar beat.
But I get why that works with a piece of wood.
Physical system.
Yeah, with a physical system, and it's reacting, they're damping each other, or they're falling into thing. But we do the same thing mentally in our heads.
The neurons are always firing in some kind of pattern, and they're not always synchronized. If that happened, that would be something like epilepsy. But there's kind of these complex swelling interactions of different groups of neurons in the brain. And when we listen to rhythms, we can measure these rhythms using electroencephalography, or EEG, so these caps where you put electrodes and record neurons. And you can see that some of the neurons will fire in time with the rhythm. And so that's actual physical entrainment.
The leap from this to doing what that man sitting behind a collection of pigskin over there, stretched pigskin, can do. That leap, I think I want to see you do, to be honest.
Because okay, I guess
because I feel that
this
is not your thing,
yeah,
at all, or whatever. Which is why it makes it an even more interesting challenge. But I'd like you to go over there and attempt to do this if you can.
You want me to do some drumming?
I'd love to do some drumming because I'd like to find out if this is a thing that anyone could do, or if you'll hit it, it'll make a sound that is never made before in the hands of a professional drummer, and then you'll walk away. That's in many ways my sincere hope.
Okay.
That you break the drums.
That I break the drums.
Oh, no, actually, no, that you break drumming.
If I am going to go and break drumming,
yeah,
I think it would be good to get a sense of what good drumming sounds like first. Shall we do that, Mark?
Yes, please.
Can you just pro of nothing, just knock out some beats for us?
Okay, so just simplistic, basically what most Western contemporary music is based on. stuff like that. But then,
fancy at the end there, didn't it?
yeah, it was a bit fancy.
I mean, he really did. He put a little bit of embellishment in the middle of all this. He's all music based.
It was quite fancy
I can
for
make
me.
it simpler than that.
But then going back to what you were saying earlier about feeling, the crowd all together and stuff like that, there's a little bit in the skunk show where the music speeds up. And if I can just demonstrate that and you tell me what you feel in your body.
Please.
So it starts off like this.
Just excitement.
Yes, it is. It is. It's an adrenaline rush there, and I want to push people around.
All right, shall I go and see if I can do
Please
that?
do.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to teach you a 4/4 beat. On the 1, 2, 3, 4, you're going to play the hi-hat.
Is that this one?
Yeah. Yeah, but if you pick the sticks up,
Oh,
both of them,
shush now.
put your foot on the hi-hat
Yeah.
pedal and close that up. That's it.
Right.
And then...
Hang on, you expect me to do this with my left hand?
No, with your right hand.
Okay.
So cross them over like
Right,
this.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So...
We should just do 4/4.
Yeah, so if you...
Look at me talking music.
Yeah, wow, you really sound like a pro there. You sound like a 7-year-old child in their first piano lesson. 4/4, okay. Yeah.
What's that? Okay, so we're going 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to... Okay, 1... I'll keep counting. 1, 2... And then on the 1 and the 3, you're going to put the bass drum.
That's this one.
Yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
You're nearly there.
Okay.
Let's start that again.
I mean,
1,
thank you for not patronising.
1,
Okay.
2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I can't.
That's better than you did it before. So, like, the neurons are going crazy. They're all, like, starting to fire up.
Come back in a week. Right, I'm going to have one last go. I'm going to have one last go.
We're getting there, okay? So now, the last bit is, on the 2 and the 4...
Oh, God.
You need to add the snare drum.
You think you'd finished the drumming, has it? You think you'd
I
mastered
thought
the drumming?
I passed drumming.
Yeah.
The snare drum.
This one?
So, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then add the bass drum in on the 1 and 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. So close.
That's the noise we wanted to hear.
Can I see you do it again?
Yeah, of course. That's like a basic disco beat, okay? But you change the hi-hats and it changes the movement of the whole thing, so... It's a very simple, subtle change, but it moves more. It makes you want to dance. It makes you want to move.
And Nina, in terms of how that is reflected in what's going on in the brain...
So we have done these kinds of experiments in the lab where we will do a steady beat just on the 1, 1. And the brain will do the 1, but it also gets the ands. So even when the and isn't there, the brain is subdividing. Wow. So the brain wave, what the person's hearing is just, what the brain's doing is 1 and 2 and 3.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.
And drumming is really important for language. It turns out that kids who are not good at following a beat often have language reading problems, and actually teaching kids rhythm. And it doesn't have to be drumming. A lot of music inherently has rhythm in it. So, basic music education is pretty great.
Nina, are brains different in drummers?
Yeah. Well, first of all our brains are different.
Of course.
But yes, there have been studies showing that the brains of drummers are somewhat different. in that it reflects the training. So, in our lab, we can measure rhythmic ability in drummers, and we can also measure the brain responses. Now, we've just been talking about how rhythm can be subdivided. Well, our brain, our neurons, are also firing in synchrony, and what's so great about sound is this happens on a microsecond level. And when you hit the crash, you've got to be right on. I thought that if you were good at one kind of rhythm, you'd be good at another kind of rhythm. You were just sort of good at rhythm. Turns out you can't predict how good a person is going to be at rhythm patterns by how good a job they do following the pulse. So these are really different processes. And people who have studied these things, like we have in the brain, we can see that there are different neural brain responses associated with one kind of rhythm and another kind of rhythm. And again, we've linked the people who can do the pulse with really good precision and the people who can do the patterns that evolve over time with really good precision. And they correspond to brain rhythms that are microsecond timing. And then there are other rhythms that evolve over seconds. And what we have seen is that drummers are particularly good at reflecting synchrony on microsecond timing.
Can it be put as simply as that Mark is capable of doing that and I am not? Or are there different types of... I mean, Mark, do you ever play jazz?
No.
Oh, could you?
It would take a lot of training for me. I've spent my whole career playing along to contemporary songs and my favourite bands, and that's how I've learnt. And playing drums as in a jazz kind of format never really interested me.
If you play jazz with the training you have and the expectation you have of what rhythm you're going to deliver, would you sound like, I'm trying to pick a nightmare scenario here.
Bad.
Hannah. I'm just saying, I like a bit of jazz. And if they all turn to you, you're on the bit at a jazz performance when they all take their turn. And would that be, what we just heard from Hannah would be essentially what you'd be doing?
The sound of the sticks falling on the kit would be what you would hear if I tried to play jazz.
8 bars of you fumbling it. But it would just be, you've trained to hit a particular thing, to do a particular rhythm, and it would be very difficult to change that, isn't it?
It's definitely changeable. If I said, right, I'm going to learn to play jazz, and I started training with somebody who's great at teaching me jazz, then I would, in 8, 10, 12, I don't know, however many weeks, this time next year, if I did it consistently, I would be able to play jazz to a certain level. There's obviously many different levels of this, but...
This sounds, Nina, though, that it's not like you have rhythm or you don't, but there are different aspects to rhythm that some people might be better at than others.
Yeah, and also the training over time. I mean, it's a good thing. We know that our brain changes based on what we do, but to really fundamentally change your brain, it takes a long time. Which is why when you learn a musical instrument, for example, this evolves over years. And we have done this in longitudinal studies, where we've tracked people over years of their musical training. And we can see that it even not after 1 year, but after 2 years, we start seeing some real fundamental changes in their brain rhythms. So, if our nervous system, if our brain changed every second, we'd be even more confused than we already are. So there's a certain stability, there's a certain part of my brain that I can sort of count on, but that with time, I can learn to change. And if I work on something, for a year or so, there will be fundamental changes in what we call neural synchrony, how our neurons fire together in my brain.
So a genuine physical difference in your brain, Mark, as well as presumably the actual physicality of sitting banging a drum for 2 hours at a time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't play particularly quietly. I'm playing quietly today, but when I'm on tour with Skunk Anansi, it's pretty brutal and it's a very, very physical thing. My arms are all the way up above my head, and it's a show, so it's theatre as well, But that is very, very physical. And I work with the Clemberg Drum Project, who did lots of measuring on me, and they measured sort of my cardiovascular system, my temperatures, and working at temperatures, and how much sweat loss there is, and all this kind of thing. And they came to the conclusion that my cardiovascular system was as efficient as a Premiership footballer. Not that I could sprint around for 90 minutes, but that it was working as efficiently as theirs.
Yeah, you got to be fit. And you bring up a really important point. I mean, here we're trying to pull rhythm out of this very big thing that we call making music. Our hearing brain actually connects to parts of our brain that are important for movement, are important for coordinating our other senses. So, our visual information, it's associated, connected with what we know. So, you already know a lot of things as a drummer, what you know, what you think, and you talked about your heart rate and clearly your nervous system on a very basic level is associated. It's all part of the hearing brain. You can't just, think of rhythm as an isolated thing. It really encompasses this embodied sense of the hearing brain, which is, the fancy way to say it is cognitive, sensory, motor, and reward, how we feel. That's all part of rhythm.
This is a very interesting way to think about it, that rhythm isn't just a little beat that you're tapping along to, it's a whole body experience. And that, I think, after my humiliation there, does bring me quite neatly onto self-proclaimed captain of the dance floor, Dara O'Brien, over there. And your...
Where's the humiliation for me? Yeah. Because you have literally very little evidence to go on this.
I've seen a video. Dara.
Yeah. Why do we enjoy this?
Yeah. What is it about dancing that why are we dancing?
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about the embodiment and the physicality of it, like whatever. But if I hear a particular beat, I want to dance. For the promise of whatever. What is it? What is it about a beat that pushes that adrenaline rush that makes us want to do that?
Yeah. So I mean that, I think, is key to understanding groove as a concept, as a psychological concept, and as a musical concept. And it comes back to the prediction. So let's think about this in a kind of Western contemporary context. The music that we hear on a dance floor, like disco, like electronic dance music, house, techno, funk, it has that regular beat, but it also has what's called polyrhythms or syncopations. And what that actually is that there's some kind of irregularity over the top of that regular beat, or the beat is shifted. And so sometimes the rhythms don't fall on the beat, but they fall off the beat. And that offbeatness, what that does, because we have those expectations about that beat, even though it's falling off the beat, even though it breaks with our expectations, we then fulfill that expectation by moving to the beat. So when you're on the dance floor, you have that regular beat, but you also have that polyrhythm or that syncopation, that offbeatness that allows you to fill in the beat with your body movement. And that filling in of the beat is a pleasurable experience, because we know that expectation and prediction is very, very key to understanding pleasure and emotion, not just in music, but in human behaviour more broadly.
I wonder about connecting all of this together, because if we're saying, Mark, that your brain has physically grown in particular directions because of how much time you spent synchronizing to rhythms, to beats and so on, can you use this the other way around, I wonder? Could you take people who perhaps have developmental issues and then help grow their brains in a particular direction through music and through rhythm?
Yeah, one area of music therapy, neurological music therapy, that's quite interesting in this context is what's called rhythmic auditory stimulation. And the population that this is mostly relevant to is Parkinson's disease. So we know that Parkinson's disease is a result of a degenerative process in the brain that depletes dopaminergic processing in a particular part of the brain that we know is important for movement. The kind of classic Parkinson's symptoms are problems with gait, freezing, tremors, so that they're movement symptoms. And so the same parts of the brain that we know are responsible for these kinds of movements and that are not functioning properly in Parkinson's are also really, really important for rhythm. And so there is some really interesting research, and this is also an actual therapy that's being used where you can introduce a click track, essentially, to patients with Parkinson's disease. And just that external rhythmic auditory stimulation, that's the name of the therapy, will help alleviate some of those freezing symptoms, the tremor symptoms, and the gait symptoms. And so it's thought that that dopaminergic depletion in this part of the brain that we know is important for movement and rhythm, so those two are intimately linked in the brain. If there's a problem in that area, you can kind of supplement it through auditory information by providing a click track.
Like you're encouraging people to sort of dance their way through life almost.
Absolutely, yes.
If you've ever been to a gym, you know, the choice of music can be quite central to how pleasant an experience it is. I mean, you can't be on a treadmill to the wrong piece of music.
Absolutely. And we know that music can help endurance during exercise, motivation. You know, if you speed up the tempo, you'll tend to run faster or, you know, do the exercise faster. There's something about that desire to fill in the beat, the desire to synchronize, that just gives us that little bit of extra energy.
I wonder about this therapeutic angle. Mark, have you ever been involved in using music as therapy?
Yeah, so the Klemberg drumming project that I was involved in, that did the research on me and my personal physiology, they also did a study where they gave lessons to autistic children twice a week for 16 weeks. And the results were amazing. They were interacting a lot more by the end of the drum lessons, and I went along to give them awards just to say well done for completing the course. And the parents were in the audience, and they were all crying because they hadn't seen their children interacting like this ever.
Nina, does that add up to what you know of the impact of rhythm on the brain?
Completely. Because remember, I was saying that the hearing brain is vast. And, you know, rhythm is an enormous part of hearing, whether it's speech or music. And by vast, I mean it engages our emotional system and our memory. So, you know, going back to the gym or to Parkinson's, you know, if you know a piece of music, you are going to move to it. You're going to respond to it differently than if you don't. What they often do with people with Parkinson's is, you know, you don't want to be going around with a click track all the time in your ears, but people get trained to think of a particular song with a rhythm, and you kind of get that in your head.
We have covered a lot more ground than I expected to on what was just a what does this mean? And it has gone in far more directions than I expected to. It's been very, very exciting. Thank you to our guest, Professor Nina Kraus, Dr. Mia Wittek, and on the drums, Mark Richardson. And I hope that answers a lot of your questions.
Yeah.
Do you feel it?
I think it has. You know, we know that rhythm is pretty innate, that humans love the act of mimicry. We know that some people are better at synchronising than others, namely Mark, and that coordination is key, and that you're going to have to practice for the rest of your life to be a good drummer. And even then, you still might not be good at jazz.
No, I won't.
What's been particularly interesting is that drummers are the brains that are expanding all the time in a band, which really confounds a regular stereotype about drummers. Which
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know.
Got it wrong.
Yeah.
We're the butt of all the jokes, but actually we know the
You're the smart ones,
score.
quietly there, banging away. Your brain's getting stronger minute by minute. Hannah, can you play us out with an 8-minute solo?
No, but maybe Mark can. If you want to be notified as soon as a new episode is released, make sure you're subscribed to Curious Cases on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on. You can manage your subscriptions from the My Sounds tab.
I'm Helena Bonham Carter, and for BBC Radio 4, this is History's Secret Heroes, a new series of rarely heard tales from World War II.
None of them knew that she'd lived this double life. They had no idea that she was Britain's top female codebreaker.
we'll hear of daring risk-takers.
What she was offering to do was to ski in over the high Carpathian Mountains in minus 40 degrees.
Of course it was dangerous, but danger was his friend. Helping people was in his blood.
Subscribe to History's Secret Heroes on BBC Sounds.
Hello, it's Ray Winstone. I'm here to tell you about my podcast on BBC Radio 4, History's Toughest Heroes. I've got stories about the pioneers, the rebels, the outcasts who define tough.
And that was the first time that anybody ever ran a car up that fast with no tires on. It almost feels like your eyeballs are going to come out of your head.
Tough enough for you? Subscribe to History's Toughest Heroes wherever you get your podcast.